What's up guys, and welcome to my first ever painting tutorial. Today we're going to have a look at the Poxwalker. I'm going to show you a really super simple way to paint it. Anyone can do this and it looks really effective on the field. If you watch the end of the video, we're going to do a giveaway on this model as my first model I'm painting for the series. So check out the end of the video and the link in the description below. So to start off with this model, I'm going to give it a bit of a base coat. I'm going to use Ulthuan Grey, hopefully I'm saying that right. And we're just going to run it through an airbrush. I'm using literally 50-50 mix, 1-to-1 ratio with window cleaner from Wilco. Really cheap, really easy. It's going to give us a really good base to start working on without losing too much of a detail. So even if you don't have an airbrush and you want to paint it by hand, this is the sort of thing you should end up with. Don't go too heavy with the paints because the last thing you want to do is lose the detail. It's a really good model. We're going to do really basic painting on this, so keeping the detail in there is quite key. First colour I'm going to be using for a shade is Reikland Flesh Shade. It's really good on top of Ulthuan Grey. It gives a really good flesh tone. And with the shade on your brush, all you're going to do is go across the model. Make sure you get the shade into all of the recesses. You're basically going to dye the Ulthuan Grey more of a flesh tone colour. It's really easy to do. Don't go too mad because if flesh tone dries in a lot of the recessed parts, you're going to get puddling and you don't want that. It's going to look a bit terrible. But this is why I want to keep the detail in the first place. You're going to notice it sinks into the recesses, comes off the highlight areas and just kind of dyes it instead and gives you a really even tone in literally one coat. When you've finished, this is what sort of result you should have from the model. You'll notice it's dyed the colour nicely. The Ulthuan Grey now looks more like flesh. The cool thing is it looks more like rotten flesh or bad flesh rather than anything you'd find on a normal model, so it fits the Chaos theme quite well. The next shade we're going to be looking at is Druchii Violet. I love this shade for anything that's quite alienish or tentacleish. I think it works really well, so we're going to use it on this model. And you're going to use it in exactly the same fashion. Just be careful not to get too much over the rest of the Reikland Flesh shade because it'll give it a bit more of a bad tone. But if you go over all the tentacles and then try and blend the gaps between the standard skin tone that you've just done and the rest of the tentacles as well. Just take it nice and steady, don't go too mad. Once you finish with Druchii Violet, you're probably going to need 2 coats realistically, but you will get a really nice purple colour over the top of the Ulthuan Grey, given the appearance of tentacles. We're going to now go to Agrex Earthshade. Again, we're going to use exactly the same method. The only difference that we're going to do this time is we're going to paint the bones / horns that's coming out of the character, out of the model. With it being Nurgle, it's quite a dirty model.
I'm a dirty boy.
So I like these dark colours used on these models. We're going to go more shade towards the horn area, the base of the horn than the tip of the horn. Ignore my camera thing here. Yeah, we'll just paint it out of sight. It's perfectly fine. Once you've done 2 coats on that, we're going to move on to the next colour. Now what we're going to be focusing on is these little boils or pox marks that's all over the Poxwalker. The disgusting stuff. We're going to use Beltane Green. You can use any other green shade if you've got a Camo Earth shade or anything like that. They all work in pretty much the same manner. I do like this colour more. It's one of my favourite colours. And all we're going to do is exactly the same. We're just going to paint it, but we're going to do it more precise this time. Try and cover the whole of the blisters and the pock marks and the warts and stuff, and give it a bit of a green shade around it so it looks more like it's plagued. And it'll merge in with the Reikland Flesh shade and with the other shades that you've been doing so far in the model, and it'll give you a really good and nice even tone, and you'll be able to see those pock marks standing out. With your pox marks done, you should have something similar to this. As you can see, the model already looks fantastic, and we've done a few colours if that. Really basic, really simple colouring. I'm going to do the pants this time. I'm going for Death World or Death Forest Green. It's one of my favourite colours. I use it quite a lot for Plague Marines. It's a nice colour. I'm using a wet palette. You can see in the corner. I've seen a few tutorials on this. Being from UK, some of the materials is quite difficult to find or difficult to match up to what a lot of guys in America are using. But all I'm going to do with this is be really careful. Make sure you're not going too mad with it. Don't go too thick with it. It's not like the shades. You need to make sure your paint is nice and thinned and watered down. And then all I'm going to do is be very careful to go around the pants area and make sure that I'm not going over any of the stuff that I've already gone through and just tidying up those lines. You are going to need 2 coats of this paint because it's not the thickest, to be quite honest, and you want to get a really nice even coat. But once you've gone around it, you'll see the model looks even better. Now he's got his pants coloured in. The next colour I'm going to be using is Lead Belcher. Lead Belcher is metallic paint, so you don't need to thin it too much. Don't go too mad because you will lose some of the consistency in it and the effect that you're going to get with it. Again, I am using it on the wet palette, but I'm not going to thin it down because the wet palette's already a little bit moist anyway. That's going to act as a bit of a thinner for Lead Belcher. Just make sure you give it a good shake or a good stir, because a lot of the pigment will sit to the bottom and you don't want that, because then it'll just be gloopy and terrible or really watery along the top. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to focus on the metallic parts of the model. Now this model specifically is using a gun upside down with a butter knife or something on the back of it. So I'm just going to focus on these. I'm not going to do all of them. The reason being I'm going to focus on some of those later in copper. Once you've done with the Lead Belcher, the gun's going to stand out quite nicely, or the weapon that he's holding in his hand is going to stand out quite nicely. It's a really cool colour. I'm going to now do the copper in Brass Scorpion. This is really good. It's not a base paint, it's a layer paint, but I find it's quite thicker than a lot of the other base paints in this sort of range. And all you're going to do with this, again, is focus on the remainder of the parts that you've not painted yet. So pick them out as you will, use your own discretion, however you kind of want to paint it. I find that the blades and the rusty parts look better in copper, so that's what I'm going to focus on here. As you can see, straight away by painting those little bits in Brass Scorpion, the weapon's starting to stand out and look a bit more higgledy-piggledy, which is what you want. You don't want it all silver, all uniformed. It's not supposed to be that sort of model. I'm now going to do some brown in Gorthor Brown. It's a really nice chocolatey colour, this, and I use it for quite a lot of the leather work, belts, pouches, that sort of stuff. It always looks really good on the models. This one is quite a thick paint, so you are going to need to thin it down a little bit. You don't want it to be too gloopy and lose a lot of the detail. But on this model specifically, you have got a belt around his back and also 2 little pouches. Once the belt and pouches are done on the model, you're pretty much ready to go. You can run this as standard if you wanted to and start playing games with this model. I do want to put a little bit more detail in it, so I'm going to pick up Screamer Pink. It's one of the colours that I tend to use for things like maggots, leeches, that sort of stuff on the model. A lot of people like to use more fleshy tones or pale tones, but I think it should stand out. So I tend to go for more of a bright colour. And all I'm going to do with this one is make sure I go around the whole model and pick out any of the leeches or maggots that's kind of sticking out on the model. And it's going to give a really nice contrast against the skin. With all the leeches done, we're going to pick up the Nuln Oil. Now this is perfect for things like metals or for any cloth that you want to dirty up a little bit. It gives a nice little black effect to it, like a oily, worn, rusty tone to it. So I'm going to put it all over the weapon. That's the bronze and the Lead Belcher, so the silver, and then all over the pants as well. And I'm going to do 2 layers on the metallics and only 1 on the pants. Once my first layer has been applied on the weapon, as you can see, it looks better, but it could still be a little bit dingy, a bit more darker. So I'm going to grab the Nuln Oil again, and we're going to slap on another layer on this metallics. With a second layer of Nuln Oil applied, you can see the weapon is a lot more dingy now, a lot more darker, a lot more old and rusty. That's exactly the sort of thing we wanted. So now I'm going to use a Shabty Bone, and this one is definitely an optional step. If you wanted to do a really easy painting, leave it as it is. It's quite difficult to do, and the last thing you want to do is start messing up your model. But what I'm going to do is use this for the teeth. So I'm going to use a really steady hand, and I'm just going to brush over the top of the teeth and just define them a little bit different to the rest of the skin, just so they stand out. As you can see, the teeth are a slightly different shade now, a little different colour, and it makes it stand out. We're going to move on to the eyes again. Don't tempt it if you don't want to tempt it. There's no reason to. I'm just doing it for the detail. I'm using Evil Sun Scarlet because I like the idea of these being quite zombie-like and having bright red, evil-looking eyes. So I'm going to use this with one of my tiny brushes. I'm going to have a really, really steady hand, and I'm going to paint just the eyeballs. Now on this model, one of the eyes is half closed, so you've got to do half an eyeball where the second one is full. Just be careful, don't get it all over your model. When you've finished the eyes, the face is pretty much there or thereabouts. All I'm going to do as a final sort of touch is grab some Agrex Earthshade. I'm going to load a little bit onto the brush. I'm going to go across the teeth. They're already a different colour to the rest of the skin, but this is going to give it a bit of shade and a bit more definition. The model is now looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with it, and all we've really used is shade and a few colours. I'm going to pick up some technical paints from Nurgle's Rot. I really like this stuff, especially for these things, to make them look a bit more disgusting, a little bit more putrid. So all I'm going to do is put a little bit onto the brush, and then all the open sores and blisters and boils, I'm just going to dip it inside and make it look as if it's leaking out, as if it's like dripping down the skin. When this dries, it does look a little bit like sick, and it looks really good on the model, and it's a really easy technical paint to do. Doesn't take much skill, but adds quite a lot of definition and extra detail to your model. As a bit of a final sort of extreme step, if you want to take it to the 10th level, I'm going to use some Stormhose Silver and the lead belcher that we've gone around and null oil and made all dirty. I'm just going to pick a few edges and I'm going to edge highlight it. And what this does is give the effect of it being like battered and bruised a little bit and having sharp metal. As you can imagine, metal that's been sheared off or that's been torn or broken has got a bit of a sharp edge. So all I'm going to do is pick a few edges, a few nuts and bolts. I'm just going to go through it and give it a nice little highlight. The Stormhose Silver on the edges has, as you can see as I'm twisting this round in the light, give it a nice little reflection, and I quite like that. I'm then going to use some more technical stuff called Nihilite Oxide, and this is the effect of copper or bronze that has been left out in the rain and oxidized. It gives it a bit of a blue tinge. So if you've ever seen anything copperish that has started to rust, you'll notice the rust is actually blue. I'm going to put it in some of the pock marks inside the metal where it looks like it's rusted and started decaying, and also a little bit along some of the angles as well, as if water or recessed dirt and dust has got inside there and started to rust it. Following on for what we did with the Stormhose Silver, I'm going to do the same with Hashnut Copper across the rest of the sort of the brass and the copper look. This is going to give it, again, another bit of an edge highlight, and it's almost as if this is the sharp edges of the copper. And all I'm going to focus this part on is actually the bottom of the rusty blade. You can see on the model is a physical line, a bit of an angle where the blade would be. I'm just going to follow that and trace it across and give it a bit more of a shine. As a final piece on the model, all I've done is use some sterling mud to give the base a little bit of texture and painted around the rim. And that is your Poxwalker done. Really easy, really simple, tabletop ready, and something you can show and impress your mates. Anyone can do this, anyone can paint it. But if you want to win this model, all you need to do is follow the link in the description below to my Instagram. Give me a follow, give me a like on the post of this Poxwalker, and I'll pick someone random and I'll ship it out to you. Cheers for watching. I'm going to do some more of these in the future. Leave a nice comment below, thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time, guys.